You guys won't believe what I picked up for the next project on the channel. This vintage relic has been sitting and rotting away under a tree in somebody's backyard for years. I'm gonna break up this video into a two-part series, so make sure that you subscribe and stay tuned for part 2. We have a 1987 TRX 250X. Look at how rusty this thing is. Not only is it covered in rust, it's completely covered in mold, moss, or algae, or whatever this green stuff is. Look at how bad the exhaust header is. And wait till you see what's inside of that exhaust. The shocks and springs are rusty. From what I've read, these are Showa shocks. I really hope I didn't waste my money on this thing. Rear subframe, the bumper, the A-arms, all have rust as well. Brake rotors and the chain are junk. Rusty brackets and hardware everywhere. Right here you can see is where the chain broke and punched a hole right through the case. It was repaired with some JB Weld. You can tell this whole thing was just spray painted over. Even the wire harness, brake line, CDI, and cables are all spray painted. Just like in all my videos, don't forget to expand the description below and check out links for all the correct parts that I used during this build. Look at these plastics for the headlight. The rear plastics are just as bad as these. Alright, first thing I'm going to do is give this thing a bath. Alright, so here's the story on this. I found it on Marketplace. The seller was asking $700 for it. I messaged her with some questions and she was pretty responsive. I asked about whether the engine was locked up, how long it's been sitting and why, and if they had the rest of the parts, like the exhaust, they had the rear plastics, and a few other things that I could see were missing. So she said that the engine was locked up and it's been sitting for years. She said that they didn't have the rear plastics and they didn't have the silencer. So while we were messaging and I was asking these questions, I didn't ask about the price at all, but she did message me stating that the price was not negotiable and they were set on the $700 that they were asking. So I thought about it a little bit and then I messaged her back telling her that I didn't want to waste her time and that it probably needed more work than what it was worth and that I wasn't interested. I thought about it more overnight and started talking myself into it. So I messaged her back the next day and scheduled a time to take a look at it. When I got there, it was late. It was already dark. That's when they were available. I met with her husband and he seemed like he was a pretty cool guy. So it turns out he did have the rear plastic. He did have the silencer. He also had a replacement engine case where it had the engine whack, and then he also had a few other extra parts. But we did discuss asking price and we ended up settling on $550 for the quad, including delivery. He was going to have his friend put it on a trailer and drop it off for it. Alright, now that it's cleaned off, we can see the true condition. You can see the rust. I do believe that this was painted over. I didn't do a good job cleaning up the rust and just painted on top of it. So all of these parts are going to get sandblasted and refinished. We're going to try to save these shocks because they still feel decent. So let the teardown begin. These plastics are just sitting on here, so I hope that they're the correct plastic. Fuel tank is a Clark 2.7 gallon aftermarket tank. And I looked these up and they're not cheap, so I guess this is a nice upgrade. This engine is totally locked up. I can't even move the Kickstarter. When I first bought this home and I was wheeling it off of the trailer, when it tilted backwards, water came pouring out of the pipe. So we're gonna open everything up and take a look and see what we find. This thing had some plant life growing all through it. Holy crap, just as I expected. Look at all this rusty water. Not a good sign of things to come. All right, well, I guess the only thing to do is to move forward in the project. So I'm gonna soak the header and some of the other brackets in a muriatic acid and water mix solution just to eat up some of the rust. Next, I'll start removing the airbox and the carburetor. These clamps are definitely trash. The throttle mechanism in the carburetor is jammed, so I'll need to loosen up the cable at the top in order to get it detached from the bottom. Alright, I removed the valve cover. Surprisingly, everything in here looks pretty clean. I don't see a ton of wear on these lobes, just a little bit. Timing chain looks good and tight. So next I'm going to remove the head and we'll see why this thing's locked up. Alright, this is the tensioner for the timing chain. So I'm going to loosen up the tension from the timing chain in order to get the head removed. Alright, head's removed, and guess what I found? That'll do it. Just drain the oil and looks pretty clean, meaning there's no water in the oil. I was able to get the cylinder separated from the bottom end. Piston's still stuck in there. I'm letting it soak. Now I'm going to have to remove these studs in order to wiggle the cylinder back and forth. So I'm going to use the 2 nut method, and I'm going to tighten these together. And that should give me the leverage to be able to remove the studs. These studs were in there really tight. I was able to get the first 2 out, no problem. The third one, I ended up whacking my hand on a sharp edge on the frame and took 2 small chunks of skin off of my hand. So I'll just tape it up and use a pipe for leverage on the last one. Alright, cylinder's out. I'm going to try to clean up the inside of this and see how it looks, but I don't think this is going to be usable. I think this is going to have to be sent out. Might be cheaper just to pick up a replacement cylinder. Here's the piston. The engine's no longer locked. Everything moves now. Next, I'm going to remove all the parts necessary to be able to remove the clutch cover. Clutch cover was getting held up on the kickstart shaft due to some corrosion, but I was able to clean it up and get it removed. Alright, so inside here where the particulate filter is, there is some broken metal in there. So I'm going to have to pull that out and take a look around and see where that may have come from. Just at a quick glance, everything looks like it's in pretty good shape. Alright, so now that I've found these broken metal fragments, I'm going to remove the bottom end so I can get a better look and see if there's any damage to the rest of the bottom end. And then once that's completed, I'll continue on with the disassembly of the rest of the four-wheeler. These are the pieces that I pulled out from inside the motor. And I was a little bit worried when I found these, but now I can see what they really are. So this piece right here in the middle, this is a piece of the aluminum case. The rest of these pieces are the repair material, the JB weld that just broke off inside the case. So what happened was this had some chain whack, and the previous owner, or the previous owner, just put some JB weld on there. And I got really worried. I thought that there was something broken. Maybe there were pieces of a shift fork or something like that, because it was hard to see when they were inside the motor covered in oil. But now I get a better look. I can really see what they are. All right, so I don't make this video too long, and since we're still waiting on some parts, I'm gonna go ahead and end this video here. So make sure you're subscribed and stay tuned for part 2.